How's it going, guys? Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Phil Talk Sports Podcast, where today we're talking basketball. Joining me here is Nick Rice, as he often does. The NBA playoffs are upon us. Well, really, they start tomorrow. So we're going to preview a lot of that. We've had some good play-in games already so far. I know this is a very important time of year for Nick, as a big basketball fan he is. If you don't believe me, just look behind him. Nick, it's playoff time. You ready or what?
Well, apparently I'm not as big of a basketball fan as I should be. Thanks for the homework assignment, Phil. I'm going to be watching Coach Carter tonight. I know that's a movie from 16 years ago, but I'm pretty amped about it. But yeah, basketball is back, and I guess I should watch it before the weekend because as a Laker fan, it's a pretty big day, Sunday afternoon too, which kind of annoys me, 12:30 tip. But I'm very amped. There's nothing like playoff basketball. We just got a small hint of that with the play-in games. But yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely watch Coach Carter before the games start getting played because I know you're going to be watching that instead. So definitely get that in. And yeah, I don't know how you don't watch Coach Carter. It's a classic. But you touched on it already. The playoffs technically start tomorrow, but we've gotten a taste of it with this play-in game, this new format. They did it last year, but last year was totally wacky with the bubble and everything. Anyway, so this is our first time seeing the play-in in true full effect. And we'll start here. LeBron came out when the season started with the play-in game that he was all for. Thought it gave guys, plenty of chances to compete. He probably didn't think he was going to be playing in the play-in game. So his opinion changed from, yeah, it's great to the guy who came up with it should be fired. And somebody should probably tell him that the Players Association kind of are the ones that wanted this in the first place. So you're kind of telling your player rep that he should be fired. But all that aside, his opinion of it has changed because he actually had to play in it. Had a great game against the Warriors. Probably would have done a great rating if it wasn't the 10 p.m. start. I'm sure he did great on the West Coast, not so much on the East Coast. The game-winning shot, great game. It's exactly what the NBA would have wanted either. It really wouldn't have mattered who won because it's this weird situation that you're not knocked out of the playoffs quite yet. So if you give me Warriors-Lakers and either Steph or LeBron hit a game-winning three, like that's what the NBA could have wanted. So while his opinion has changed on it, having to play in one. What is your opinion of the play-in game? Do you like it? Do you just wish we had the normal, was it 1-8 seeding? Now that we've kind of, we've seen the best version of this because there's been very good games. There's also been a blowout or two, but I think we really get the feel for what this is. So what's your opinion on the play-in games?
I think it's pretty cool. I have an intriguing idea to kind of tinker with the play-in that I'll bring up in just a second. But if LeBron is mad about this, Adam Silver did just come out today saying that he is planning on starting next season in mid-October, kind of like how we had it before. So
Okay.
I'm sure he'd be pretty pissed about the 3-month off season again before this next year, if indeed that goes through. But anyways, speaking of the play-in, I think it's a pretty neat idea. Too often, I feel like the first round of the playoffs isn't very intriguing. And I guess we still have 1-8, with the actual playoffs. But there's an element of March Madness that now is into the NBA. It could serve the NBA well for having that added sense of urgency. And also the format of the double elimination for the upper seeds makes it feel like it isn't too crazy to believe that if you lose both of those games, you really don't even earn a playoff spot. You don't really deserve to be in the top 8 if you can't beat a 9 or a 10 seed one of two times.
I agree. And so that's why, it did take me a minute to figure it out because when I think double elimination kind of stuff, I think of the NCAA College World Series and the softball tournaments, and I get confused. I'll watch those games. I'm like, oh, cool. Florida State beat Louisville, so they're moving on. And it's like, no, they actually have to win 2 more games. But if this team wins 3, then they're still at it gets confusing.
Right, and then another team only has to win once.
It's right. So this is a simplified. If I understand it, I assume most other basketball fans understand it too. So for the most part, I'm a fan of it. It serves a second purpose that it doesn't eliminate tanking. And I think for the people that thought it would, it's a little unrealistic. But it definitely throws you in a situation of less people will tank. For example, the Magic, my Magic were riddled with injuries all year. We were starting guys on 10-day contracts, the worst health riddled season I think I've ever seen in the NBA. And deep past the All-Star break, we were 2 or 3 games out of that 10th seed to get into that play-in tournament. So, there was, as there is with most fan bases when your team isn't doing well, you got the tank camp and you got the, no, let's push for this. So the people that are at the very bottom are probably still going to tank. But the people that are a level above absolute garbage will still kind of have something to play for and can sneak into this playoff thing. And so for the most part, I am a fan of it. I do think they'll tweak the format a little bit. I almost wouldn't mind, because I think baseball did this, right? Where you do these, one-off game and truly make them sudden death elimination. I understand the difference of going from a 7-game series to a sudden death elimination is a bit jarring. That's why you kind of have this, you got to lose 2 games to be knocked out. So it's kind of a happy medium there. So that I understand. And I do think it'll take a few years to get used to it. Because even as this year went on, I was watching, I look at that 8 seed, like you pull up the standings and that's where your eyes always go. That's where the line is. And now you're forgetting that there's 2 other seeds that still throw you into the mix at least. And you're still rewarded for being one of those top 8 seeds, especially, at the very top or whatever. But here's my other question too. Do you consider if your team, let's say the Lakers, they made the play-in tournament and they lost, let's just say, do you consider that my team made the playoffs?
To me, they were having this discussion on the broadcast. I think this is the playoffs. Yeah, and they're saying, these stats are not going to go down as regular season or playoffs. It's something different.
Yeah, it's like, kind of in the middle.
Yeah, I'm like, I get that, but it serves like a playoff game. I think it should be playoffs.
To me, I say no, and it's only for it reminds me, like in March Madness, they've added that like bubble round, right, where the 68 team, can get to the round of 64. They don't really classify that as like Michigan State, for example. They were in that play-in tournament in the bubble game against UCLA. I don't think on their wall in their locker room where they have all their tournament appearances, I don't think that's going to count, especially a team like Michigan State that has a higher standard. Maybe if you were, Missouri Valley State or something that's only been in like 10 times in their history, then maybe you do count it. Maybe it comes down to that. But I'm almost curious. So who's a team that's been knocked out? The Spurs, right? So the Spurs are knocked out. And of course, Popovich and that, great team had I might try to look this up as we talk, had that amazing 20-plus year run of playoff appearances. So I'm curious, like in that instance, right? They made it to the play and they got knocked out. So does that count as a playoff appearance? And I say no, just because it's a whole set. But I understand the argument of, well, the stats don't count towards regular season, so there's only one other place to put it. So in my opinion, I still say no, but it is a gray area that I hope they figure out down the line.
For sure. And while you're looking that up, I have an intriguing idea that's never going to happen, but I think would be really cool to incentivize teams to play good like the NFL does. Right now, there is a top seed bye in each conference for the NFL. In the NBA, you don't have that. How you fix it is a play-in tournament that features seeds 6 through 9, and only 7 teams make the playoffs, giving the top seed a bye. That would be an intriguing motivation for teams to reach the 5th seed to not get the play-in and to get the 1 seed. So that way there's no bye. So that way we don't have a Utah Jazz winning or the Atlanta Hawks winning each of these conferences every year, because they were the only teams that cared among the playoff teams to make the playoffs. Interesting idea. There could be something along those lines. I've always been of the mindset that, the NFL does a really cool thing of having a bye for the top seed, rewarding teams for winning the conference. Will it happen? I think not. But it was proven in the bubble that a team can take a significant amount of time off and come back and play great basketball. I mean, these teams took 4 months off, so that sort of thing wouldn't be a thing. I just believe that there's a lot of revenue to be had for a number 1 seed playing an 8 seed, even though they win all but 1 time in the history of the NBA, they still want to rake in that money. So it's not going to happen, but I believe that that'd be a really cool adjustment. So that way we have, more interesting playoff matchups in the first round.
I think we talked about it when the NFL shifted to that extra playoff spot. So now only the number 1 seed gets the bye. And I think we were both fans of it, because before it was, the 1 seed and the 2 seed, they're kind of the same thing. Like you don't have to really now pushing for the 1 seed is all that matters. So I agree. If you could reward the top team in a conference with a bye, I'd be all for it. I understand your concept with the tournament and everything. I think they're happy with this because it's, like you said, it's that in the middle of like a March Madness feel, but still gives you a little bit of a series of the NBA. So I pulled up the Spurs, and there's a perfect example because they've had this, great playoff run here, and then they didn't, technically they didn't make the playoffs last year either. So that's really when that was snapped. But as I look at the Spurs seasons on Wikipedia here, break by break, it has like a playoff section and it says like, oh, they either won the finals or they lost in the semifinals, lost in the first round, blah, blah, blah. In the 18-19 season, they lost in the first round of the Nuggets. Last year, they didn't make the play-in tournament or anything, and the playoff section is blank. And in 2021, as we sit right now, the playoff section is also blank. So that makes me lead towards, at least right now, the historians and the stat keepers don't count it as making the playoffs, is where it seems to sit. And I'm okay with that because it is a little bit different. To me, it's almost like, okay, in the NFL, right? Every couple of years, it'll come down to, Eagles, Cowboys, week 17, week 18 now. The winner wins the NFC East and the loser goes home. Technically, that's a play-in game because you're a playoff game. You're winning or you're going home, but it's still part of the regular season. So while you are in win now mode, win or go home mode, the rest of the league is not yet. So I think that might be the difference. But I mean, it's definitely a debate. If you want to tell me, again, if you're the Wizards, right, and we're going to talk more about them and the crazy run that they've been on. If you came all the way up to the play-in tournament and lost, if you want to tell me, we but I think you have to specify, like, oh, but my team made the playoffs, we made the play-in tournament, and then we got bounced out. Like, I think it's a 1B section. It's we made the playoffs, we made the play-in tournament, not just we made the playoffs.
Yeah, good luck to the statisticians figuring all that out.
Yeah.
I got a headache doing that, but
here's another great example too. I'll throw this out there. I know you're not a big soccer guy, but like in the World Cup, you have the group stage, right? And everybody gets to play their 4 games against, or the 3 games, whatever it is, against your other opponents, and you can get knocked out of that. So you have what's known as the group stage, and then you move into the knockout round, the true tournament of it all. So in a way, this is like a group stage for the NBA. I think that's the best example I can give it to.
Well, then I would argue just throw that in the regular season then, if you're gonna put it in the playoff. I'd hate to have all these performances like Jason Tatum scoring 50 not even count.
Yeah,
So
if you had to put it in the playoff basket or the regular season basket, like if those are your 2 options, are you putting it in the regular season or are you putting it in the playoffs?
Well, shoot, after talking to you and shooting down my great playoff idea, I think ultimately what they're going to do is regular season, and I wouldn't be mad with it. I prefer it being a playoff thing, because the playoff stats are getting adjusted all the time. We used to have a best of 5 in the first round.
Right.
And,
which I liked, by the way. I wish we'd go back to that.
Yeah.
Although now we don't need to as much because, like you said, the first rounds weren't always entertaining. They might be a little more now because you really have to work to even get into one. But I always enjoy it. I say that about baseball, too. First round should be shorter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think the NBA, like the 72 games, add in the urgency. I mean, again, another thing that I think is actually pretty cool, which won't happen, is, maybe we do shorten the season to kind of reduce some of these injuries. It was insane this year, the amount of injuries.
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
Orlando's
I talked about the Magic being bad, but there was injuries all over the league on top of us. I think we were just the flag bearer for it all.
For sure. It seems like the Magic have, they better hire some more medical staff because it seems like this has been an issue for you guys for a while now.
Yeah.
But this is the one year where the whole NBA just got ravaged with injuries.
So we mentioned, I just want to talk before we get out of the play-in game talk here. We mentioned the Warriors Laker game, which was great. It's what the NBA wanted in this playoff game or play-in tournament, I think. The Spurs went into the good night against, Memphis, so they're moving on. So we got Warriors. Memphis will be in the play-in round, which I think either plays tonight. That's the one. Yeah, that'll be playing now. So we'll start there. Do you think the Warriors rebound from, what was probably a gut punch way to lose? Do you think they sneak in the tournament, or do you think Memphis has the advantage?
Yeah, I think the whole play-in tournament goes chalk, and the 8 and 9 get in on both sides, 7 and 8 rather. Wizards picked up a huge win. Westbrook really redeemed himself yesterday, so that was pretty good to see. I think Warriors win. They were really, really impressive. They were I think the greatest team to lose in the first round of the play-in. They were
Mm.
exceptional. Steph Curry was ridiculous. And while I don't think he's going to be that hot again, I believe Golden State has the championship pedigree to win in a game like this.
Yeah. Um, I agree. I think it's one thing to lose to the Lakers in a one-off, but I think anybody else, like I think Curry's going to be ready. I think really the rest of his team, backed him up. I thought it was one of those that felt like Captain America in Infinity War, and then all of his guys show up to back him up after a minute.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. I do think this one goes chalk, and we get this. So at that point, we'll get Warriors Jazz, which will. Do I have that right? Yeah. So that'll be interesting, and then we know we have Lakers Phoenix, which is also going to be a barn burner. Jump into the other side of the play-in tournament before we get into the true rounds of the playoffs. Indiana made short work of Charlotte in their play-in round. A big win, actually. And then Boston, was it? The Wizards took on Boston, and what a season they've really had, where they were, to start the year, the worst team in the league. I think they had like a 13-game losing streak or something, to bounce all the way back, not quite to a 500 record, 34-38 against the exactly 500, 36-36 Boston Celtics. And while Jason Tatum had 50-point game, as you alluded to earlier, it was not enough to get past the Wizards. And now the Wizards, let me have
Oh
this
no,
right.
but Boston beat them, and then the Wizards came back.
There we go. I have okay. So all these arrows can throw me off. So yeah, the 50-point game by Tatum was enough to get by them, but when the Pacers looked so great against Charlotte, I thought, okay, we're just going to have more of the same in this next round. And then it was actually the Wizards that blew out the Pacers. So they, punched their ticket, a 1-8 matchup that could be interesting. I want to talk about Philadelphia a little bit more, but what a season for the Wizards to go all the way back from just a terrible start to making the official playoffs. Now, they're the example of, losing the first game, but getting into the second one and sneaking into the playoffs. And I think they're an exciting team, and you want them in this role.
Yeah, I think that was pretty clear what just happened right there, that we do not need to add any more teams to the play-in tournament.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. I'm following all these arrows, these W's and L's. Like it does take me a minute.
Right. So after today, at the time of our recording, it'll all be over. So we'll get to the real playoffs, and we understand that bracket.
Exactly.
With that being said, I first of all, Charlotte was a huge disappointment to come that far, and then to show up, for lack of a better word, to just not even leave the bus. That was just embarrassing. Washington, that Russell Westbrook really proved himself in that game. I mean, for a while he was, after that loss to Indiana, the way that he lost, it was there was a little bit of a stigma there, that this is a guy that couldn't work well with Kevin Durant, and the playoffs flamed out and shot poorly with Paul George by his side. So this was great for him to at least, give his team a chance in the playoffs. They had, according to ESPN BPI, a 0.6% chance at the end of that losing streak to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
So they turned it around. That was really cool. And they're in. And it was chalk, but it still was interesting to see the play-in, tournament and all these games.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of the many great stories in the playoffs here. And I think as we get to the true round of the playoffs, the opening round, to me, like there's point again, I want to talk Sixers, I want to talk, Nets and all that stuff. But is there a more surprising team this year than the New York Knicks getting the 4 seed? Like there's no way anybody saw that coming.
Phoenix getting the 2 seed.
Yeah, that's
Monty
true.
Williams, a shout out to him, coach of the year. I don't think anyone's going to have much dispute on that. Maybe Doc Rivers earns some credit, even though his team's pretty legit. Him turning the stigma of this team being a huge disappointment to now, many eyes, the favorite in the East, or one of the favorites, is pretty cool. But yeah, New York, shout out Julius Randle from Kentucky, formerly with the Lakers. He really has turned himself into a comeback player of the year candidate. What a year it was for him. Derrick Rose, same story there.
Absolutely.
Definitely
I think in the running for 6th man of the year too, Derrick Rose. He's had a real career resurgence since going back to New York for his second stint.
Which is crazy, man. It's like Adrian Peterson 2.0. So this is a team that I don't think makes it past the first round because they have just worked so hard to get here. I think you've got to have some level of talent. But, I'm a Lakers guy, clearly. where was this Julius Randle in LA? I'm not sure. I see flashes, but he's really put it all together, and I'm really proud of him for turning his career into what it is. A really cool story for Julius Randle.
You say they could be a one and done out of the first round, but really, like, playing the Hawks, to me, that's their best bet to get to the next round. Like the
Oh
Hawks,
yeah.
so like if they were playing Milwaukee or Boston or they've kind of had their way with Boston throughout the regular season, but like if they had some of these other teams, I'd feel a little more worried. I would not be shocked if they beat Atlanta necessarily, but that is what's great about this playoff as a whole. As I pull the whole thing up here to show it, I might be able to screen share it here, but in the meantime, I'll talk. This is the most wide open, I think, the playoffs have been in a long time, because you have your defending champions. But they're so deep down on the totem pole because of the injuries they had. And yeah, here we go.
All right.
So
Cool.
so again, you have your defending champions. You have the Lakers, but they're coming in from the play-in tournament, so it's not the typical swagger you'd get from a defending champion. You got Utah in the number 1 seed. You got Philly. You touched on in the number 1 seed. Let's start there for a minute. They're the number 1 seed in the East. Brooklyn could have maybe been that, but they have not been healthy to where all three people have played. All three stars have played throughout the whole year. Do you think the Sixers deserve to be the favorite in the East?
Oh yeah, for sure. They beat Brooklyn. They won the season series. Philadelphia really impressed me by putting all of their band of misfits together. I mean, it was not a very glorious end to last year, to say the least, for the 76ers, but they really showed this season that they were, ready to go up against the Brooklyn, and they took care of business. And now they get Washington, a losing team, and then they get either the Knicks or the Hawks. I just made my thoughts known about who wins that series, but that is about as favorable on paper of a path for Philly to the East Finals. Meanwhile, Brooklyn, they earned themselves back-to-back beatings against Boston, a pretty darn good team. They will, take some skin off of Brooklyn in the opening round. And then they get either East champion Miami or a team that is good enough to win the whole thing in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
That is a brutal road. And the Lakers have a very similar path to the conference finals.
I think Milwaukee, just to touch on, a couple of things you said there. Last year, they were the team that everybody, even in the bubble, were like, no, this is their year. It's almost not necessarily now or never, but getting kind of close to that. I think Milwaukee likes where they are, kind of being slept on as the 3rd seed. So I would definitely look at them. It's not hard to say that the first 3 teams are the most likely, but Brooklyn, assuming they're finally all going to play together, we barely see. I think we've seen that for like 15 games all year total. It feels like anyway. But I think Milwaukee, if I'm a player on that team, and even if I'm a fan of that team, them being a little tucked away in that 3rd seed to be slept on a little bit could pay dividends down the line. And we know what happened with Miami last year. If they got hot, they got all the way to the finals. So the East is very wide open. I'll make this known now. I'm wearing the Magic shirt just so there's no confusion. But as a Eagles fan and a Phillies fan and a Flyers fan, I've always had plenty of love and respect for the Sixers, and I'm definitely rolling with them throughout these playoffs. So to me, they remind me a lot of, maybe not this first round here, but as I say this about the Packers almost every year, the basketball equivalent of the Packers. It wouldn't shock me if they won the whole thing, and it wouldn't shock me if they got bounced in the first round. Given this matchup, though, with the Wizards, I would more so, if they get upset in the next round, because we've seen, them just have these debacles in random close games or whatever. So I could see them, like you said, they might have the easiest road to the East Finals, and I would like to see that. But then there's no way around a team like a Milwaukee or a Brooklyn or a Miami or a New York or a Boston if they were good enough to slay these other teams. So I am rolling with Philly for the duration of the playoffs. I wanted to make that known. The Knicks would be an amazing story. I don't think they're quite, it's a legendary year for them for sure. I don't know that they're quite ready to go headhunting against these, East powers necessarily, but I do hope they keep it going, because I am one of those people that subscribe to the theory that the league is better when the Knicks are good.
Yeah. We're going to learn in about a month who was more to blame for the Clippers' huge second round exits year after year with Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Doc Rivers,
Hmm.
or Chris Paul, because
Yes.
he gets a chance to knock out his buddy, the LA Lakers. Meanwhile, Philadelphia has a chance to really show that Doc Rivers was the catalyst to so many great teams. And to me, my money's on Doc Rivers. For you said you wouldn't be surprised if they win the whole thing. I
Hmm.
wouldn't be surprised if they win the whole thing either,
Yeah.
because they should have been the number one seed, or at least the top 2 or 3 seed, for a couple of years now. They have all the
Yeah.
talent. It's just they couldn't really put it together. And I know you're a huge fan of JJ Redick. When
Yeah.
he was with Philadelphia, it's like, they had all the tools and they still couldn't get it done. I mean, they had now a couple of baby stars and like a Tobias Harris and company, but
Yeah.
Philadelphia had all the tools. And I think Doc Rivers is just that change of voice, kind of like Kansas City. They were so great, or rather, Andy Reid comes to town and just
Yeah.
provides a new voice, even though Kansas City was always a playoff team. I know I keep flashing back to the NFL.
Mhm.
Same thing with the NBA. Sometimes a new voice really helps turn around a locker room, and that clearly has happened with Philly.
Yeah, I think that's a great comparison there. Andy Reid goes to Kansas City, and really the thing with Philly, you mentioned like the JJ Redick versions of this team. If Kawhi Leonard doesn't hit that shot that sits on the rim for a day before it goes in, that could have been their year. You never know. I mean, it's hard to shoulda, coulda, woulda talk like that, but like they were that close to the East Finals even that year. So Kawhi Leonard obviously not in the West Coast, same with the Clippers, which we will jump here in a second over to the West. But yeah, Philly is definitely my team moving forward in this. Milwaukee, like you said, I would not sleep on them because I think they're in under the radar mode, and that's how they would prefer it. And then there's always the monster under the bed that if Brooklyn can actually get healthy and all three of these guys are playing at one time.
Yeah.
On to the Western side of the bracket, Utah in the number one seed. If you watch them play, you can't argue that they've earned that number one seed, but it seems so out of place for Utah to be that high up the table. So I'm wondering if, it's going to be a little too high for them. And obviously they'll get the Warriors or Memphis in the first round. I think the Warriors can, as you said, take some skin off them moving forward. You got the Clippers also similar to my Bucks situation that are tucked away in the fourth seed. Last year, they were one of those, they got to win it all. This is their year. And, when they got bounced in the second round, it was definitely a big disappointment. You got Denver, sitting there at the 3 seed. They can do a lot of damage. We talked about how good Phoenix was a minute ago. And of course, the Lakers are hoping to get back. I think it's safe to assume that without the injuries, the Lakers would have easily been in that second or third seed anyway. So we know that number 7 beside their name is strictly from victim of circumstance. So much like the East, the West is as wide open as it's been in a long time, I think.
Yeah, Denver, I would say, is a finals. It's a finals threat, but losing Jamal Murray for the year, I just think that Jokic will not be able to carry this team that far. In
Yeah.
fact, I think they've got a long series coming against Portland. I
Mm-hmm.
still think the Nuggets win, but I think Portland is such a dangerous team right now with Damian Lillard. They are scorching hot. They had to win out to avoid the play-in that the Lakers had in the final 2 weeks of the season. They did that. Yeah, I think Portland really they might go 7 against this Denver team. And then you talked about it a moment ago. Utah, they are just so well coached, putting it all together, and they have a series that will be tough, but I think anyone could agree Utah should win and play most likely the Clippers in the next round. And I think that's a pretty darn good series too. Clippers and that hot offense against one of the league's best defenses.
So then who would you say, I'm glad I was able to get that to work. Who would you say is your favorite in the West? I went with Philly in the East. I think you kind of sort of agreed with me there. Who do you got in the West?
Personally, I for the East, I love Philly.
Mm-hmm.
But I also love Brooklyn too.
Yeah. But there's such a if factor with them is my problem. If they were healthy and tearing through the league with all three of their stars, it would be harder to go with Philly. But, so I agree with you. As long as they're healthy, they're as likely as anybody.
Yeah, I'd hate to be a better man. This is
Yeah.
why I don't bet.
Yeah.
in the West, just so that I stop pausing here, because personally, the East is going to be incredibly fascinating this year. Shout out to all the people that say this is the Eastern Conference with no stars, no talent. The East is going to be the conference to watch in these playoffs. In the West, I still got the Lakers, man. I know I got some serious bias, so I think people really want to hear what you believe is going to happen in the West. But I just believe LA has too much championship pedigree, too much firepower, too many question marks across the Western Conference for them to not come out of this. Literally everyone is either dealing with injuries, chemistry issues, or a lack of talent. That's the top two seeds, lack of talent. Fourth seed with Clippers, lack of chemistry. Third seed with the Nuggets, injuries. So I believe that the Lakers will have to go 6 or 7 in every series. Suns, next round, it would be, boy, I really wish you had your bracket still up.
I assume the winner of Clippers and Mavericks, or
no, that's who Utah would get.
So it'd be Denver and Portland, winner of that.
Okay, all right. So probably 6 or 7 against the Suns, 6 or 7 against the Nuggets. Even Portland could give them 6 or 7. Trailblazers won the series 2-1 against the Lakers this year, and then probably a 6 or 7 game series against the Clippers, unless Utah figures it out there. So it's going to be the Lakers are if they win the West, they are going to be limping into the West. I can tell you that much.
Right, because usually with the Lakers in general and LeBron in general, even when it was in the East, they're usually a top 1 or 2 seed, so they're getting that easier. I'm not going to say it's easy, but an easier ride to the conference final, similar to what we said is going on with Philly. Yep. They might have the hardest road to get there, so that does make it a little more interesting. I've felt that if with Denver, obviously the injuries are huge. Utah is not a number 1 seed for no reason. There's still a part of me. I mean, if the Suns are as good as they've been all year, they could not easily beat the Lakers, but it's something that could happen. Yep. And then the Clippers, if they figured out the chemistry, the talent is clearly there. So if we're gonna, we'll throw Brooklyn in on the if they're healthy. I'll throw the Clippers out there if they can figure out, chemistry wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the last couple of games, they sure did take a lot of heat for losing to the Thunder and the Rockets back-to-back games. And I don't think that's a way for Tyronn Lue to ingratiate himself into the team, or I guess maybe that's exactly how he ingratiated himself into the team. We're going to do whatever we can to avoid the Lakers as long as possible. Wouldn't be my coaching strategy, but, they're now the 4 and they got what they wanted. Quote unquote easier road to the finals, but to be honest, it's a brutal road nonetheless. I mean, the Mavericks took a couple games out of them. That was without Kristaps Porzingis. Now he is with the Mavericks, so I better be careful if I'm the Clippers, just assuming that I'm going to go to the Western Finals, and we'll see you there, Lakers. So the Clippers better figure this thing out real quickly. And to me, this is yet another year where they're going into the playoffs with the amount of confidence that they are a back-to-back champion defending their crown, and they're not. And I wish them the best of luck, but to me, I wouldn't go about it this way. I would have won as many games as I could. I would have kept the players out down the stretch of this year to build that continuity and go into the postseason with more reps with Rajon Rondo and some of the other guys they got at the trading deadline. Not the strategy I would have had down the stretch of this year for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it a minute ago. The West is as wide open as it can be. It's not a year that you could have really walked through like we've seen the Warriors do, for years in the past. And the Clippers on paper are as good as one of those teams that get to sleepwalk, but this was not the year to do it. So maybe that 4th seed comes back to bite them here. You mentioned Jokic a little bit. We talked about Embiid here,
Jokic.
And did I mess it up?
You said Jokic. Jokic. It's
Jokic.
Maybe, yeah, for sure.
Jokic. Anyway, so we have
I just didn't want you to get out of sports bar. I didn't want you to get shoved around. So
there you go. Yeah, good call. A lot of these guys, have MVP candidates on their team, which would explain why, why they're doing as successful as they are. And I'm going to pull this up here. This is NBA on TNT's final 3. Tell me if you agree with this. We got Jokic.
Yes.
Joel Embiid, and Steph Curry. So out of those three, do you agree? Is there anyone else you should throw in there? And if so, who? And if it's out of these three, who would your pick be?
Yeah, I'm struggling to find who else I put on there. And really, it's just injuries.
Yeah.
Injuries that stop, a lot of guys from having a chance. To me, my personal opinion, I will go Steph. I know he's low on the 8 seed. He's low in the Western Conference standings,
But he's
but
also the reason they're there. So I understand that fully.
exactly. I believe the Warriors would be probably, if not the worst team in the West, the second to worst if he got hurt.
Yeah.
I would go Steph. And I know we're enamored by the conference standings, and I know that I'm going to be proven wrong because either Jokic or Embiid are going to win it, but I would go Steph.
I can't argue with that at all because I was one of those people, the year that Peyton Manning sat out the whole year with his neck injury, I thought he should have been MVP because every game was just proof on how valuable he was to the Colts
Ernest
that
Painter,
day. Worst quarterback I've ever seen with my own eyeballs is Curtis Painter. I'm just throwing that out there.
Okay, all right, good to
know. That being said, I would be fine with Curry. I would like to see Joel Embiid win it. I could understand if he's missed just a few too many games due to injury. He's not been out the whole time, but he's kind of been in and out of the lineup. But he's been absolutely dominant when he is in there. So while I could see it going to Curry, me personally, I think, it's nothing we haven't seen before him winning an MVP. So I would like to see Embiid win it just it's more of a personal thing than from facts.
I really don't think Curry's going to win it. I think the way that these voting, the years these votes have gone, and of course, a lot of the heavy hitters are injured for a good portion of the year, but I really don't think they're going. I don't think they're willing to take the punishment from the community, from the sports world that would just absolutely excruciate these guys for saying that Curry's the MVP. I think if I were to predict, I think Jokic will win it, but I wouldn't be shocked if Embiid wins it. My number 2 would be Embiid, kind of like how that picture had it. I go Curry, Embiid, Jokic. I think the culture in Denver has a lot to do with them winning as many games. I think Murray helped carry them high into the standings. Now, Jokic has been a winning formula as of late, but and I love Jokic, but I would go Curry, Embiid. I mean, Embiid's been just an absolute force. I think even with the injuries, the Sixers would take him over anybody in the NBA this year.
I agree. So that's going to be interesting, year. Obviously, it's a wide open year due to LeBron being out as much as he would easily. And, if we just had more of his sample size, he would have, if not in the top 3, right behind those guys, with the year he's had. So, it's a very wide open year with his injury. And it's not like we call it the Charles Barkley year, right? Like Michael Jordan could have won it every year, but every once in a while they had to give it to somebody else. This isn't like that because no matter how big of a LeBron fan you are, and I'm not, it doesn't matter because he's been hurt so long that you can't make the argument at all for LeBron, in my opinion.
And when he was healthy, he wasn't so dominant that, you still have to give it to him. So I will even admit that even though, he says Wash King on Instagram and all that stuff, he was better a couple of years ago. I don't think he's quite the same. And of course, with the injury, that's a big asterisk going into the playoffs. Are the Lakers going to have LeBron, who's at least 90%? And against the Warriors in the first half, I didn't think so. I think he's about 85%. So, there goes the Wash King. There goes the MVP.
Yep. So, yeah, I'm interested to see. If it's any of those 3 guys, I think you get it right, at least. So, if it's one of those 3 guys, we don't have a problem. Few quick things to talk about before we get out of here. Did you catch any of the Hall of Fame stuff going on earlier in the week or last week?
Because I'm a broadcaster and because you're a broadcaster, Phil, you'll appreciate this. The only speech I caught a little bit of is Mike Breen, and he is one of the greatest announcers of all time. And there is almost no disputing that. And if there is, you better watch some tape right now. Mike Breen highlights on YouTube. Everybody loves this guy, and for great reason. He is just amazing. And from all I know, he's also a Hall of Fame person too. So all of the greats, shout out to this guy. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett. Tim Duncan, maybe the greatest Hall of Fame class ever. But to me, the GOAT of the Hall of Fame class is Mike Breen. He is, and also one more thing, I'm rambling a little bit here. The Basketball Hall of Fame, the way they do it, I love it the most. You were a Hall of Famer in basketball.
Yes.
That's how you get in. And to me, that's how other sports should do it too.
You took the words right out of my mouth, and I'm not even mad about it, because I've said this actually on my show with Doug about the draft. We started talking about Hall of Fame for some reason, and I mentioned how that's the case, and I appreciate that. You mentioned the star-studded lineup, Kobe Bryant, of course, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Tony Kukoc got in this year, which got lost on me with all the hoopla going on, and even Chris Bosh was in, which I was a little surprised. But
yeah, that was a little shocking.
We actually, so me and a coworker broke it down at work, and he's a 10-time All-Star. He's a 2-time champ. Like, when you hear the name Chris Bosh, you don't necessarily think of it, but when you look at his resume, it stacks up pretty well. But
I thought about it from day one. Yeah. I know he didn't have a lot of winning years, but I thought of it day one too.
Your statement about the way it's a basketball Hall of Fame, I absolutely love. My best example of this, I will explain to people that don't know how it is. Someone like Grant Hill, right, who had a pretty good but injury-riddled pro career, but was an absolute phenom in college. When you wrap that up together, that makes a Hall of Fame career. 2-time national champion, player of the year, yada yada.
Broadcaster too, that helped.
Broadcaster too, that goes in. And I love that there's point. Reggie Miller is probably a Hall of Famer off his playing career, but you tack on his presence on NBA on TNT, and it's a wrap. And
he was born and raised right up the road from where I live near LA, so shout out to him.
Yep. So I've always loved I would kind of enjoy that with a pro football, or not even a football Hall of Fame. I would enjoy it, but those have been made. The college football Hall of Fame is already a solidified thing, and the NFL Hall of Fame is its own animal. But even and baseball, it's a little harder to do, because I would almost love, as someone who works in minor league baseball, and I'm going to sound stupid if this exists and I just don't know it, if there isn't a minor league Hall of Fame. Like, I know there's records kept, and you got your home run kings, and you got individual leagues might have Hall of Fames, but I think the minor league system is such an integral part of the sport that it should be recognized like that. But really, basketball is the only sport that I feel like it fits to just do it as one sport. And they'll bring in WNBA players. I think in some rare cases you have international players that make it and stuff too, and guys might make it off of their Olympic careers, even like guys in other countries. And I think that's really cool, and it shows how global. I've always said, other than soccer, basketball is the most global sport in the world, I think, because while you might not watch them as an NBA fan, you're aware that there's professional leagues in Spain and Italy and China and these other places. You might not watch them, but you're fully aware that professional basketball is being played all over the world. And I think this Hall of Fame really, shows that it's a neutral and it's a international thing. It's not just NBA Hall of Fame. And I think that's what makes it so special.
And to me, that's the shame in the one and done situation, because now you've taken that aspect of the Hall of Fame out. I mean, the great players performing highly in college, you're not going to have that resume to get into a Hall of Fame as a college basketball player like you did in the past. So that's a whole other conversation, but that's the shame of, the Hall of Fame now. How do you boost your resume with 30 games of a college career?
Yeah, it's really going to be difficult to get in based on a college career anymore, which is, I'm basically echoing what you just said. Now it's almost completely your pro career. I mean, everyone, like, I don't know, the guys from Gonzaga that stayed all 4 years, right? That maybe if they go on and have a pretty decent NBA career, guys like that could get in maybe, but it's a lot harder to do. But I do appreciate the fact that, and this goes back to, if they ever get rid of the one and done rule, I'd be okay with it, because the guys that want to go straight to the G League or the NBA can do that. And it leaves college basketball intact for the guys that want to be there for 2, 3, 4 years. Right. So I think it'll only benefit everybody. And if you think you're good enough to go straight to the NBA and you find out to be incorrect, that's kind of on you at that point, because the system was in place for you to get an education and get, 3 years with a great coach, because if you're one of these one and done guys, you're going to a big school, and but nowadays, I forget who it is, the the guy
Ben
that
Simmons went to LSU.
yeah,
Which
but
is still big, but it's not.
yeah, it's not a basketball power anymore. I guess it was like in the Shaq days and all that. I want to end on this actually because we're about wrapping up here and with a lot of great basketball. I don't talk basketball a lot, as we know. It's a football dominated show, college football, NFL, all that other stuff. But always been a big basketball fan. Obviously, the Orlando Magic are the closest sports team to me on a professional level. Probably the first outside of wrestling, the first sport I ever watched. So I do have a very good connection with basketball in general, and I work a lot of games at Stetson and Daytona State among other places. But so I'm glad we could do a centerized episode about the playoffs, and there people talk about how great hockey playoffs are, and they are, but the NBA is something special, and I think at this point, by the time we get to the conference finals and everything else, we're going to have pretty close to full stadium, so we're going to get that atmosphere for the playoffs that we obviously didn't get last year, and that it's been a while since we had. But we mentioned there is a difference between a basketball Hall of Fame and an NBA Hall of Fame. The same way, I think you can be a fan of basketball and you can be a fan of just the NBA. So there's people that just watch the NBA. They love watching LeBron and Curry and all that. Then you got guys like us that we watch college basketball. We work at college basketball, and you might work a high school game and you just enjoy the game itself. So one thing I want to plug here, just as we get out of here, if you have not checked it out, it's starting again for season 4 on July 10th. Is the Big Three. If you're not familiar with the Big Three league, a lot of retired NBA players, along with some guys that maybe had great college careers and stuff. And 3-on-3 basketball, half court, just like you'd play at the park. It's got a hip hop vibe to it. It's owned by Ice Cube, if that gives you an idea of what it is. And before I go any further, Nick, have you watched any Big Three ever in their 3 seasons prior to COVID?
Oh yeah, every now and then.
Yeah,
with Joe Johnson a lot when he was on.
It's a fun time, and you'll go on there and you'll notice, you'll see guys that you've enjoyed watching in the NBA. Usually some of the more personality guys, someone like Nate Robinson plays in this league or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to quickly just run through. You mentioned Joe Johnson, part of he was the reigning MVP. I'm trying to remember the team name. They all have none of the teams are like based off of cities, so you don't have to I'd watch Joe Johnson, but he's playing for Boston, and I don't like Boston. All these teams are a lot of them are 3 related. You got triplets, tri-state, trilogy. Then you got some teams like Power, Killer Threes, Ghost Ballers, things like that. But Joe Johnson is the reigning MVP and champion from that league. I'm trying to see what team he was on. But it basically got him a shot back in the NBA, and he played last year, and then he's going back to the Big Three. And just to name some other guys, Carlos Boozer, Quentin Richardson, Chris Birdman Anderson, Nick Young, Swaggy P's playing in it this year. Who else we got? Andre Owen, Rashard Lewis, Reggie Evans, Mario Chalmers. I'm just kind of jumping around here. Al Horford. Triplets is the name of Joe Johnson's team. Basically, you have the starting 3 guys are typically going to be guys and then you have a 3-man bench. And those might not be players you're familiar with, and you kind of get used to them, watching this league. And it's fun. It's usually done over 2 days and they've expanded teams too. They're up to, I think, 10. I know they started with 6. But yeah, it's a fun thing. It starts, I think it's on CBS. It starts July 10th. And if you love basketball past the NBA, I recommend giving it a try because it is a fun, unique way to watch basketball with the 3-on-3 half court. And it's all the rules you're used to. You got to clear the ball from the 3-point line if you rebound. It's a first to halftime starts when one team gets to 25 points, and then it's first to 50. So it's not even a time game. It's a first to 50 type thing. So as we made this whole episode about basketball, I just want to throw out there that when the NBA season's over, basketball's not done for the year. Check out the Big Three, and I think you'll enjoy it.
I like how you said Ice Cube brings in the highest profile guys. One of the first names you mentioned was Al Horford.
No, that was like the 10th name I mentioned. I was just scrolling through Joe Johnson. He's easily the face of the league, and to me, Rashard Lewis too probably be number 2.
Right. I think I don't know. There's no other high profile guy. I mean, no offense to Al Horford. I mean, he was a great player. A little disappointing end to his NBA career.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm. Nate Robinson too. I know Glenn Davis. I think he's going to coach now, but he played on a championship team, I think, in the 2nd season. And I'm probably missing. Yeah. Okay. Glenn Davis is still playing, but You jump around and there's people that some guys will like more than others, but you'd be surprised how many people are in this league, and it'll be cool to see. It's becoming a thing because it's like only a 10-game season or so. So a lot of guys, when they leave the league, if they could have maybe played another year, they'll jump in the Big Three for a season or two because it's only 10 games plus playoffs.
Maybe
So I would
I'm just
go ahead.
or sorry to cut you off there. Maybe I'm just naive, but I think it'd be kind of cool if every now and then there was a football player that crossed party lines.
T.O. tried to do it actually at one point, and Ice Cube told him
Really?
no. So that I agree, that would have been interesting. The age limit is 22, so you're not gonna get guys like at a high school necessarily. That could change down the road, but basically, it's guys that have had somewhat of a college career, maybe an international career, and they come over to this. So
right.
As we close that, I would just say, like I said, when the playoffs are over and we have our champion, we'll still have some basketball going. So check out the Big Three. Other than that, guys, I want to thank Nick for talking basketball with me today, and I hope everyone enjoys the NBA playoffs, and we'll see you next time.